Hi everyone, Doug and Julie here with our 2021 Ford Mustang Mach-E electric vehicle. June 24th, 2023 saw our city host the World of Formula E in the Southwire Portland E-Prix. Julie and I were in attendance, so in this video I wanted to share our day, give an honest review of Formula E racing, and opine a little bit about the future of racing. Full disclosure, there isn't a lot of Mach-E content in this video, so if you're not interested in e-racing, feel free to skip this episode. Although, if you're a race fan at all, stick around, you might find this interesting. But first, a quick update on the Mach-E as it continues to be put to regular service as our do-all vehicle. Julie and I have been traveling a bit, so it has seen the airport a few times. And summer brings yard projects, and the Mach-E is up to the task as a hauling vehicle. It did have its first 10,000 mile service, which I'd planned to do a video on, but it was so simple I decided not to bother. It was just a tire rotation and overall checkover, at no cost to us, by the way. We also took another road trip, and this one didn't go as well. Check out episode 10 for that story. But overall, the Mach-E continues to be one of the best cars we've ever owned. If you know me at all, you'll know I've been a fan of racing for a long time. As a boy, my love of cars got me interested in sports car racing, cheering on anything Porsche at the great races like Sebring, Daytona, and Le Mans. But as I grew into a young man, my passion turned to IndyCar racing. Living around the home of the greatest spectacle in racing probably had a lot to do with that, but ultimately it was the thrill of seeing these cars in person that had me hooked from day one. I've been to numerous Indy 500s, a couple of Cleveland Grand Prix, and of course now living in the Pacific Northwest, every Grand Prix of Portland since 2018. Now a fan and advocate of EVs, when the FIA announced that the ABB Formula E World Championship would make its only US stop in our city, I just had to check it out myself. While I do consider myself something of a racing purist, I'm certainly open to new ideas. And while I do love the sound of a 750 horsepower twin-turbo V6 ripping around a racetrack, unlike some purists, I'm not put off by racing of a more silent type. At the end of the day, it's all about speed and competition, and cool-looking cars. The Formula E car is currently in its third generation. It's hard to get exact specs, as manufacturers are understandably secretive about their technology, but it's believed each 1,675-pound car makes about 470 horsepower and can reach a top speed of 200 miles an hour. Impressively, the Gen 3 car is designed for more than 40% of the energy used within a race to be produced by regenerative braking, with regeneration allowed on both front and rear axles for a maximum of 600 kilowatts recovery under heavy braking. Throw in an electric motor that boasts a 95% power efficiency, and it's easy to see why the Gen 3 car is considered the fastest, lightest, most powerful and efficient electric race car in the world. This brings us to the Formula E's overall message of sustainability. Arguably, it seems a bit hypocritical to ship an entire racing series around the world to promote sustainability, but if you check out the FIA Formula E website, they publish a sustainability report that details a number of ways the series works toward a net zero carbon goal. I don't know enough to have a strong opinion about this, but to me, it looks like a sincere attempt at a more responsible world-class sport. For the Portland IndyCar races, Julie and I take the MAX, Portland's light rail mass transit, as it goes right by the track. But on this day we drove, as there was a special parking dedicated for EVs. Or at least we thought it was for EVs. Maybe some of these people forgot to charge up and took their ICE cars instead? Side note, getting into the track was easy, but getting out was a pain. We won't be driving there again. Entering Portland International Raceway, it looks like a pretty standard day of racing. But once into the fan village, it begins to feel a little different. Along with the usual merchandise and food vendors, there were a number of displays that related to electrification and sustainability. It was here where we got to meet Chris and Julie Ramsey of Plug-in Adventures. They were on their pole-to-pole expedition, traveling from the North Pole to the South Pole in a slightly modified Nissan Ariya. I'll put a link to their website and a video on their Portland stop in the description. If you get a chance, check them out. Overall, we liked the fan village, especially because it gave us something to do during the number of downtimes throughout the day. Unlike an IndyCar race, or any other race series for that matter, where practice, qualifying, and the race itself are spread out over 2 or 3 days, the Formula E race was pretty much all done in one day. There was a preliminary practice on Friday afternoon, which wasn't open to the fans, but the next practice, qualifying, and the race all took place on Saturday. Having never been to a Formula E race before, let alone see a Formula E car in person, We arrived in plenty of time to catch all the action. And my first impression? Well, see for yourself. This is a video I posted on social media. Greetings from Portland International Raceway. These are electric race cars behind me. And it's so weird. It's so quiet. There's no engine sound. It's just all whine and wind up here. And then in the corners, it's all tire noise. This is the weirdest experience I've ever had seeing racing. You hear him whining, taking off. Wait. Whoosh. Very cool. That's it. Bye. There certainly is a noticeable whine under acceleration. But as they blow by in the straight, it's just a fast whoosh. When we got to our seats just before turn 1, the differences continued as the loudest sounds came from the squealing tire, followed by more whine as they blasted out of the chicane. Very different, but also very cool. Practice ran from 10:30 to 11:30, after which there was about an hour of downtime before qualifying. We walked the fan village again and caught a bit of the driver Q&A with Jake Dennis and Andre Lauderer. Who are they, you might ask? Well, I confess I didn't know a lot of the drivers in the series, or much about the teams for that matter, but these two raced for Avalanche Andretti. Yes, that Andretti. One of 2 American teams in this global series, along with DS Penske. I also knew Porsche had a team in this series. In fact, the pace car was a Porsche Taycan. So we picked those teams as ones to root for. Qualifying started around 12:40. It was an interesting format. At first, 2 different groups of 11 cars went out to set their fastest times. From each group, the 4 fastest cars would advance to a knockout format where 2 cars would take to the track in what they called duels, and the fastest in each duel would advance to the next round. From the outside, it seemed like a weird format, but on the day, it was very easy to follow along and provided some interesting drama to each session.
Already 2 Nissan powertrains are through to the semifinals in the 2 factory cars. What can Rast do? As for DaCosta, his time is a 109.453. That you would think could leave him vulnerable, but Rast has not had the pace here in this run, at least to this point. Let's check the 3rd sector. To the stripe, and Rast does find the time. Randy Rast with a perfect 3rd sector.
At the end of the final round, it was Avalanche Andretti's Jake Dennis on the pole. Cool.
Straz touches the wall on the exit of the corner. That's allowed Dennis to start to close in. Checker Black waits for Straz. Dennis goes sub 109. Can he get the pole? Can he take the championship lead? Jake Dennis coming to the checker flag, looking for his first pole and the points lead.
After qualifying, there was about a 3-hour wait until the race started. This gave the cars time to fully charge up again. For the fans, there was an autograph session, but we didn't get the paddock passes required to do this. Neither of us are really big autograph seekers. We spent our time in the fan village, getting some pizza and enjoying the music and atmosphere. There was a big stage where Cautious Clay put on a concert. But we found these ladies equally entertaining. Overall, there was a lot to do and see, but I have to admit we started to get a little bored, and after a couple of hours in the hot sun, we sought out some shade to just relax and people watch until the race started.
The 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. We wait, and we are on!
But at 5 o'clock, it was time to race. The race itself would only be 32 laps, a far cry from the 110 laps of an IndyCar race. But overall, it was entertaining and an enjoyable watch. But there were a few striking differences from most conventional races. The biggest thing we noticed was, while the drivers were going fast and racing wheel to wheel like in the other series, there was a lot of strategy and energy saving going on. This is not unusual in and of itself. Many an IndyCar driver has won a race on fuel strategy. But the way these cars went about it through the entire race was interesting. The race announcer even compared it to a peloton, like from the Tour de France. The drivers wanted to be in front, but didn't necessarily want to lead. They wanted to go fast enough to not fall behind, but not so fast you ran out of energy before the end of the race. There were no pit stops during the race, so these calculations were happening lap after lap. And what we got were 32 laps where the bulk of the cars drove around in a pack. Nobody pulled away all race. Sitting in the stands, this felt like drama on every lap. Pretty cool. Another thing we liked was the simple fact that we could actually hear the announcers during the race. Since we were new to this series and didn't know the ins and outs of race strategy, etc., this was a nice bonus. Almost like watching it on TV where you can hear the announcers, but of course you're right there. The other effect this had was you could hear more from the fans around you. In a way, it made us all feel a little bit more like we were part of the action. Very cool. There was contact between cars and there were yellows. This led to one humorous occasion when all the cars slowed down at once, almost like somebody had flipped the main breaker and all the cars came to a crawl.
Full course yellow. That's funny.
We got a chuckle out of it anyway. As the race went into the final laps, a handful of cars started to appear as the favorites, including the pole sitter Jake Dennis from Andretti and Antonio Felix da Costa from the Porsche team. Da Costa actually led most of the final laps, but ultimately lost it to Nick Cassidy of the Envision Jaguar team with just a couple to go. So, what did this hardcore IndyCar fan think of the Portland E-Prix? Did I love it or hate it? Well, my feelings fall somewhere in between, albeit closer to the love it side of the scale. On the positive side, the speed is there. Just a few seconds off an IndyCar's lap time, these things looked and felt very fast. And the cars themselves had a very cool, futuristic look. And the racing action was there, with side-by-side racing pretty much every lap, and good drama throughout. One surprise to me was that I didn't miss the sound of a gas engine one bit. On the downside, while the speed was there, it felt like the race was more of a strategic challenge than an old-school, foot-to-the-floor, fastest guy wins kind of race. One of IndyCar's biggest criticisms is sometimes the races feel like parades, and the E-Prix definitely had some of that vibe. A very fast, occasionally chaotic parade, but a parade nonetheless. And finally, the race itself was very short. We spent the whole day there, so we felt like we got our money's worth, but a number of fans only came for the afternoon, and some for just the race itself. If we had done that, we'd have felt pretty cheated. It looks like the race is coming back next year, but we haven't decided if we'll go again. But I'd say Formula E has a couple of new fans. All of this brings us to the question, is Formula E the future of racing? Well, it certainly seems to be heading that way. With the exception of NASCAR, whose technology only recently adopted fuel injection, all the major racing series are, or will soon be, electrified. Even IndyCar is going hybrid in 2024. Old-school racing purists may moan and groan, but the reality is manufacturers want to participate in racing that helps them develop and sell road cars. And since road cars are clearly heading toward electrification, it's only logical that racing will too. If you're a race fan but are struggling to warm up to the idea of e-racing, I'll just say give it a chance. And definitely try to go see a race in person before you decide. Much like how driving an EV road car is different from driving a gas car, e-racing is a little different, but it's still racing. And also like driving an EV road car, the more you learn about e-racing, the more interesting and enjoyable it is. Count me in.